I still remember the afternoon I opened the door to my beach house in Malibu and saw my daughter-in-law, Sarah, sitting there like she already owned the place. She was swirling a glass of wine, her eyes scanning every corner of the living room like she was making a mental inventory. Then she looked at me and said, "We really need to start thinking about the estate. You shouldn't be making these decisions alone anymore." In that moment, my stomach dropped. My heart sank. I knew exactly why she was there. Not for me, not for family. She was there for the house, for the money, for the inheritance, and suddenly, everything I had been trying so hard to ignore came crashing in at once. If you're watching, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story gets a lot more interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But to understand why that moment nearly broke me, I have to take you back to where it all began. My name is Elizabeth Thompson. I'm 63 years old, a widow. I spent most of my life in Chicago working as an administrative secretary. I didn't have much, just a little house on the south side, a pension that was nothing to brag about, and memories of my late husband David, who passed away from a heart attack 12 years ago. Since then, my son Michael has been my anchor, or at least I thought he was. The day everything changed started out like any other. A routine doctor's visit, nothing more. I'd found a small lump in my left breast. Figured it was probably benign, something they'd remove and I'd move on. I wasn't worried. But when the doctor came in and pulled up a chair, I knew it wasn't good. His face softened, his tone dropped low. "Elizabeth," he said, "your biopsy came back. You have stage 2 breast cancer." I swear the room started spinning. The word cancer hit me like a freight train. I couldn't even process the rest of what he said about treatment options, survival rates, next steps. It all blurred into static. I remember forcing a laugh, the kind of laugh you make when you're desperate for it to be a mistake. "Are you sure? Could the test be wrong?" I asked, praying for some kind of miracle answer. But the doctor just shook his head and laid his hand on mine, gentle but firm. No mistake. I walked out of that hospital with my legs shaking and a piece of paper in my hand with the words "chemotherapy schedule" printed across the top. First thing I did was pull out my phone. I called Michael, my only child, my lifeline. When he picked up, I was already crying. "Honey, I just left the doctor's office. They told me I have cancer." There was a pause. I could hear him typing on his keyboard, the muffled background noise of his office. Then, in that clipped, hurried voice of his, he said, "Mom, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back." And then he hung up, just like that. I stood in the middle of the hospital parking lot, clutching my phone like it could explain what just happened. People were walking by, cars honking, life moving on like nothing changed. But for me, everything had just shattered. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Chemotherapy is brutal. No one really tells you how much it strips away. Not just your hair, not just your energy, but your dignity, your sense of self. I'd drive myself to the hospital in the morning, sit for hours while poison dripped into my veins, then drag my body back home, nauseous and hollow. Sometimes I'd have to pull over on the side of the road just to throw up. I called Michael a few more times. Sometimes he didn't answer. Sometimes he'd pick up only to brush me off with, "Mom, I'm swamped at work. Can you just talk to Sarah?" But Sarah never called, not once. So I picked up the phone one day and called her myself. I remember my voice cracking as I asked, "Sarah, do you think you could come with me to my next session? Just so I'm not alone?" She laughed lightly, almost dismissively. "Oh, Elizabeth, you're strong. You can handle it. Besides, I've got Ethan and work and a million other things. You don't really need me there, do you? And just like that, she changed the subject to some vacation they were planning. I hung up the phone and sat there in my kitchen, staring at the peeling wallpaper, realizing that whatever family I thought I had wasn't really there. Every time I went to chemo, I saw it. Husbands holding their wives' hands, daughters bringing their moms blankets and snacks, grandkids reading books to their grandmothers in the waiting room, and then there was me, sitting by myself, a water bottle, a scarf, and the hum of the IV machine. I'd force a smile when the nurses came around, but the truth, I felt invisible. It wasn't the cancer that broke me down. It wasn't the hair falling out in clumps or the metallic taste that made everything I ate feel like chewing coins. It was the silence, the emptiness of walking into a cold house at night and knowing no one was waiting for me. No one was going to ask, "How was treatment today?" Not my son, not my daughter-in-law. No one. People always say you learn who your real friends are when times get tough. I learned something even harder. Sometimes you realize your own family isn't your family at all. I'd sit there in the evenings, wrapped in an old quilt, staring at the photo of David and me on our wedding day. And I'd think, why am I the only one who cares if I live or die? That thought haunted me more than the diagnosis itself. I don't tell you this to make you pity me. I tell you this so you can see the hole I was standing in, the darkness I had to climb out of, because soon something happened, something I never could have expected that would change the course of my life. And it all began with a phone call about my brother Robert. The thing about chemotherapy is, it doesn't just hit your body, it crawls into every part of your life. It steals your appetite, your energy, your hair. But worst of all, it steals the version of you that people recognize. I remember the first time I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror after my second round. My hair, once a thick chestnut gray, clung to the brush in clumps. My skin had this pale, almost waxy tone. I leaned on the sink and whispered out loud, "God, who even are you anymore?" And then I laughed, this bitter little laugh, because the woman staring back didn't look like me at all. Driving myself to the hospital became a routine. I'd grip the wheel with trembling hands, park in the same spot, and walk into the chemo ward where the air always smelled faintly of antiseptic and despair. I'd watch other patients being ushered in by husbands, wives, children. Some of them had whole entourages, like they were heading into a family picnic instead of a cancer ward. And there was me, always me, alone. One morning, as I sat in that vinyl chair with the IV needle in my arm, I looked across at a woman about my age. Her daughter was reading a magazine out loud to her, cracking jokes, making her mother giggle in between waves of nausea. For a split second, my eyes welled up. I wanted to trade places, not for less pain, no, for that hand to hold, for that laugh to carry me through. When my session ended, I called Michael again. I don't even know why. Maybe I thought this time would be different. Maybe a son can feel when his mother is breaking. He answered, voice clipped, rushed as always. "Mom, I told you I'm slammed right now. Can you just figure it out?" I swallowed hard, tried to keep the tremble out of my voice. I don't know how much more of this I can do alone. There was silence, then a sigh. "You'll be fine, Mom. You're stronger than you think." And then the click of him hanging up, "Stronger than I think." That line rattled around in my head. People love to tell you how strong you are when it means they don't have to show up. Sarah wasn't any better. One afternoon, I got desperate enough to call her again. My voice cracked as I asked, "Could you maybe take me to just one appointment?" Just so I'm not the only one walking in alone?
She let out a breathy laugh. Elizabeth, honestly, you don't want me sitting there looking miserable. You're independent. You've always been. Besides, Michael and I are planning a trip with Ethan. We really need the break. You understand, don't you? Understand. That word stung worse than the chemo drip. I said yes, of course. Because what else could I say? But when I hung up, I pressed the phone against my chest and sobbed until my whole body shook. Nights were the worst. I'd sit in my recliner, wrapped in an old quilt, listening to the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. No footsteps, no voices, just silence. And that silence wasn't neutral. It was loud. It screamed, "You're alone. No one's coming." Sometimes I'd look at the phone and think, what if I just stopped calling? Would they even notice? That thought scared me more than the cancer itself, because deep down, I suspected the answer. But the strangest thing happened in that silence. Somewhere between the nausea and the loneliness, anger started to spark. Small at first, like embers in a dying fire. But every time Michael brushed me off, every time Sarah dismissed me, those embers glowed hotter. I thought, if I survive this, it won't be for them. It'll be in spite of them. And yet, even as I told myself that, I couldn't let go of the hope. The hope that maybe, just once, they'd show up. That's why, when the phone rang one evening and I saw Michael's name on the screen, my heart actually skipped. I answered fast, too fast, but he wasn't calling to check on me. His voice was casual, almost bored. "Hey, Mom, Sarah and I were talking. Do you have a will written out? You know, just in case I froze." I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. "A will?" I asked slowly. "Yeah," he said. "It's just practical. You never know how these things go." Sarah said it might give you peace of mind. Peace of mind. That's what he called it. My son wasn't worried about my chemo sessions, about whether I could keep food down, about the nights I sat alone shaking from fever. He was worried about paperwork, about what I'd leave behind. When we hung up, I sat there staring at the blank wall. The loneliness I'd been drowning in all those weeks twisted into something darker. Suspicion. Fear. Because suddenly I wasn't sure if my family wanted me to get better at all, and that was the moment I realized this wasn't just cancer I was fighting. It was betrayal, and betrayal cuts deeper than any disease. I was sitting at the kitchen table one gray Chicago morning, staring at the steam rising from a cup of coffee I couldn't even taste, when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. My body ached from chemo, my mind was heavy, and honestly, I was tired of bad news. But when I picked up, the voice on the other end was different. Calm, formal. A lawyer. He said words that spun me in a way I didn't expect. "Mrs. Thompson, I regret to inform you your brother Robert passed away from a heart attack." For a second I couldn't breathe. Robert, my older brother. The man I hadn't spoken to in years. We'd grown apart, pride and old grudges pulling us to opposite corners of the country. And now, just like that, gone. But then the lawyer's tone shifted. "He left you his estate in Malibu, the beach house, and significant financial assets." I dropped into a chair. The room tilted. My heart pounded. A beach house? Assets? I hadn't even known Robert thought of me. I'd pictured him living his own life, maybe forgetting about me the way Michael seemed to. But here he was, even in death, reaching out, protecting me. I pressed the phone to my chest when the call ended, whispering to the empty kitchen, "Why Robert? Why me?" And in the quiet, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. A flicker of hope. That week, I put my Chicago house on the market.
Packing up felt like ripping pages from a book. Every corner held memories. David fixing the leaky sink, Michael blowing out birthday candles, me staring at the phone waiting for calls that never came. But now, all of it felt haunted. Haunted by absence. Haunted by betrayal. When I stepped off the plane in California, the air felt different. Softer. Saltier. The sun warmed my face in a way Chicago never did. And when I first drove up to that Malibu beach house, sitting tall against the ocean, the waves crashing just beyond the deck, I actually cried. Not because it was beautiful, though it was. I cried because for the first time in so long, I felt like life was giving something back. I remember standing in the living room, running my fingers across the wood beams, whispering, "This is mine. This is my fresh start." But it didn't take long for word to spread. Sarah was the first to show up. I didn't invite her. She arrived unannounced, all smiles and sugary words, carrying a bottle of wine like we were about to celebrate. She hugged me, her perfume too strong, her grip too tight. "Oh, Elizabeth," she cooed, "I'm just so glad you're doing better. Malibu suits you." But her eyes weren't on me. They were on the ocean view, on the marble countertops, on the frame deed lying on the desk. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but the longer she stayed, the more the mask slipped. She asked little questions that didn't sound little at all. "So, have you thought about estate planning? About what happens if, God forbid, the cancer takes a turn? It must be so stressful, managing a place like this alone." Her voice was syrup, but her words were poison. And when I told her I was fine, she tilted her head, gave me this pitying smile, and said, "You know, some people are worried about you. About whether the treatments affected your memory, your judgment." My chest tightened. "What do you mean, some people?" She shrugged, pretending innocence. "Neighbors talk. Even the pharmacy mentioned you seemed confused." That's when it hit me. She wasn't here for me. She was planting seeds, painting me as unstable. And the worst part? She was good at it. I saw the way she chatted with the grocery clerk, the way she lingered in the neighborhood cafe, her voice carrying just enough to be overheard. "Poor Elizabeth," she'd say, shaking her head. "She's been through so much." Sometimes she forgets things. Sometimes she doesn't seem all there. One evening, I walked into the living room and caught her leafing through papers on my desk. When she noticed me, she laughed nervously, waving the documents like it was nothing. "Oh, I was just curious, Elizabeth. I know Michael worries so much about you. We just want to make sure everything's in order." That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling while the waves pounded outside. I thought of Robert, of how his last act was to give me this house, this chance, and now my own family was circling like vultures. For the first time in months, I didn't feel sick from chemo. I felt sick from betrayal, from the gnawing suspicion that the people who should have been protecting me were sharpening their knives instead. I whispered into the darkness, "Not again. Not this time. You won't take this from me." And in that whisper, a fire was born. Because I realized cancer wasn't my only fight anymore. My real battle was just beginning. It started with little things. A phone call from Michael that sounded almost sweet at first. "Hey Mom, just checking in." My heart leapt, foolish as ever, thinking maybe he finally wanted to know how I was doing. But 2 minutes in, the tone shifted. "So, Sarah mentioned the house feels a little overwhelming for you. Have you thought about letting us help manage it?" There it was, the hook beneath the bait. I answered softly, trying not to sound wounded. "I'm fine, Michael. I've been managing just fine." He sighed, the way he always did when he thought I was being difficult. "Mom, you don't have to pretend." We just want to take the stress off you. For Ethan's sake, too. It's not about money. But I knew. Every pause, every too casual mention of the estate, every glance Sarah gave me when she thought I wasn't looking, it was all about money. Then came the rumors. I'd run into neighbors at the market, and they'd tilt their heads, speaking slowly, like I was fragile. One woman whispered, "Sarah said you've been forgetting things lately." "I'm so sorry, dear. If you ever need someone to drive you..." Forgetting things? I wanted to scream. I was 63, not 93. I was battling cancer, not losing my mind. But I realized then, Sarah was laying groundwork, turning the community against me, one careful comment at a time. And soon, it wasn't just gossip. One evening, I opened a thick envelope that had been slipped under my door. Legal documents, a guardianship petition, my own son's name at the top. My knees buckled. Michael was asking the court to declare me incompetent, to strip me of control. His affidavit was full of lies. She forgets conversations, mismanages medication, puts herself at risk. And Sarah's sworn statement backed him up, painting me as some poor confused woman who couldn't be trusted with her own life. I sat there shaking, the papers spread across my lap. My own flesh and blood was trying to erase me while I was still alive. So the next time they visited, I didn't smile. I didn't play polite. I laid the papers on the coffee table between us. Explain this. Michael shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. Sarah, on the other hand, leaned forward with that fake, pitying smile. "Elizabeth, it's for your own good. We just want to protect you. You've been through so much. Sometimes you don't even remember what day it is." My voice cracked, but it was steel underneath. I remember enough to know betrayal when I see it. Michael finally snapped, his mask slipping. "Why can't you just make this easy, Mom? We're trying to help you. Don't you see? You're not thinking clearly." I stared at him, my only son. And for the first time, I saw not the boy I raised, but a stranger. A desperate man, cornered by debt, by greed, willing to sacrifice his own mother for a chance at a fortune. And then I told them something that froze the smiles off their faces. Robert thought of this. He put in a clause. If anyone tries to challenge my capacity, the entire estate goes to charity. Every last penny, so go ahead. Keep pushing. See what happens. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael's jaw clenched. Sarah's eyes flashed with fury. For once I had the power, and they knew it. But the rage in Sarah's face told me this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I wish I could tell you that after I confronted them with Robert's clause, they backed off. That they came to their senses, apologized, maybe even found some shred of decency left in them. But the truth? That moment was just gasoline on a fire. A week later, I came home from a doctor's appointment and noticed the front door slightly ajar. My stomach sank. I pushed it open, and there was Sarah, inside my house, rifling through my desk drawers like a thief. She jumped when she saw me. "Elizabeth." "Oh, I was just looking for some paperwork for Michael. You know, insurance stuff. Don't lie to me." My voice shook, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was fury. "You were trying to find the will?" Her smile vanished. Her eyes hardened. "Do you really think you can keep all this to yourself? You're sick. You can't handle it. Michael and we deserve this house more than you ever will." Her words sliced through me. Not because of the greed, by then I'd expected that, but because she said it with such venom, like I was nothing but an obstacle to her. I whispered. I raised him. I gave him everything I could. "And this is how you both repay me?" She rolled her eyes. Michael has debts you wouldn't understand. We've been carrying the family for years, while you sit here playing victim. It's time you stepped aside. My blood boiled. Stepped aside? For what? So you can strip this house bare, sell off Robert's legacy, and leave me to rot? That's when Michael walked in, his tie loose, his face drawn. He froze at the sight of us. Sarah, he muttered, but it was too late. I turned on him. You filed for guardianship. You tried to take my life away with a pen and a lie. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To see your own child declare you incompetent? He rubbed his temples, looking more exhausted than remorseful. Mom, you don't get it. I didn't have a choice. The debts. Sarah's right. We're drowning. This house could change everything for us.
I stared at him, my son, the boy I used to rock to sleep, the man I thought would hold my hand through the darkest nights. And all I saw was desperation, not love, not family, just greed eating him alive. You always had a choice, I said, my voice steady now, and you chose betrayal. Sarah scoffed, her patience snapping. Enough of this pity show. You're a lonely old woman clinging to a house you don't even deserve. You think Robert left it to you out of love? He left it to you because he knew you'd waste it, and now you're wasting our time. She took a step closer, her face inches from mine. You're not going to win, Elizabeth. Sick, old women never do. But she was wrong, because in that moment, something inside me shifted. The fear, the loneliness, the doubt, they burned away, leaving only steel. I straightened my back, looked her dead in the eye, and said, Then you don't know me at all. And that's when everything unraveled. Sarah's rage boiled over. She slammed her hand on the table, knocking over a glass that shattered on the floor. If you won't give it up willingly, she hissed, we'll find another way. Michael pulled her back, his voice cracking. Sarah, stop. But it was too late. The damage was done. I had seen them for who they truly were, and there was no going back. Later that night, when I sat alone in the quiet of the beach house, I felt the weight of it all pressing on me. The betrayal, the loss, the brutal realization that the people I'd loved most in this world would rather see me powerless than see me free. But under that weight, there was also clarity. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I wasn't just fighting for Robert's memory. I was fighting for myself, for my dignity, for the truth that no amount of greed could erase. And I promised myself, right then and there, they would not win. Not this time. I knew Sarah wouldn't back down. The look in her eyes when I told her about Robert's clause, it wasn't just anger, it was hatred. Hatred that I had power. Hatred that her little scheme had crumbled before it even began. For days the house felt heavy with her presence, even when she wasn't there. I'd catch myself locking every door twice, checking the windows at night. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. I knew a storm was coming, and I was right. One night, long after the sun had set and the waves outside had turned into a dark roar, I heard glass shatter. My heart jumped into my throat. I grabbed the phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers, and crept toward the living room. There she was, Sarah, her hair wild, her face twisted with rage, her hands yanking open drawers, scattering papers like a woman possessed. "Sarah!" I shouted. "Get out of my house!" She spun around, her eyes blazing. "This should have been ours!" she screamed. "You don't deserve any of it. You should have died in Chicago." My body froze, every nerve screaming with fear, but the operator's voice on the phone grounded me. "Stay calm, ma'am. Help is on the way." Sarah lunged toward me, her hand raised like she might strike. But just then, the sound of sirens pierced the night. Red and blue lights flashed across the walls.
2 officers burst through the broken door, grabbing her before she could reach me. Her screams filled the house, shrill and venomous. "You ruined everything. You ruined us." They cuffed her, dragged her out into the night as neighbors gathered outside, watching, whispering. And me? I just stood there, clutching the phone, shaking from head to toe. Not from weakness this time, but from the realization that it was finally over. The next weeks unfolded like scenes from a movie I never asked to be part of. Sarah was charged with breaking and entering, attempted fraud, and more. Her perfect little mask of suburban grace crumbled in court, replaced by headlines that read, "Local woman arrested in Malibu estate scandal." Michael tried to distance himself, but the truth came out. His name was all over the guardianship petition, all over the lies. And when the press dug deeper, they found the mountain of debts he'd been hiding, gambling, failed investments, even loans from people he had no business borrowing from. His career disintegrated overnight. The company he worked for cut ties. Friends stopped returning his calls. Even Ethan's school parents whispered behind Sarah's back until she couldn't show her face without shame.
I should have felt pity. After all, he was my son. But when I looked at him across the courtroom one afternoon, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow, I didn't see the boy I raised. I saw a man who had chosen greed over love, who had looked at his own mother and decided she was worth more dead than alive. And pity has no place for people who make that choice. Still, the loneliness was there. The ache of knowing I had lost the only family I thought I had left. But then, something beautiful happened. The neighbors who once whispered Sarah's rumors began showing up at my door with casseroles, flowers, little notes. One woman knocked and said softly, "We're sorry we believed her. You're stronger than anyone I know." And in their kindness, I felt something shift. I realized family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you least expect it. It was that thought that gave me the idea. I sat one morning at the kitchen table, the ocean glittering outside, and thought about every chemo session I endured alone, every silent night where I begged for someone, anyone, to just sit with me. I didn't want anyone else to go through that. So I took Robert's gift, the house, and the money, and I created the New Dawn Fund, a foundation to support isolated cancer patients. We provided rides to chemo, volunteers to sit with patients, meals for those too tired to cook. The first time I visited the hospital, wearing a volunteer badge, walking into that same ward where I used to sit by myself, my chest swelled with something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. A woman grabbed my hand and whispered, "Thank you for being here." I thought I'd have to do this alone, and I squeezed her hand back, tears in my eyes, thinking, "You're not alone. Not anymore." Life in Malibu became something I never thought I'd have again. Peaceful. Joyful, even. I'd sit on the deck in the evenings, watching the sun melt into the horizon, the waves kissing the shore, and I'd feel David and Robert with me. Not gone. Just transformed into the salt air and the orange glow of twilight. And sometimes, when Ethan visited, because yes, my grandson still found his way to me, I'd see the innocence in his eyes, the way he still ran down the beach with his arms wide, laughing, free of the poison his parents carried. And I'd think, maybe this is how the cycle breaks. Maybe love finds a way, even through broken people. As for Michael and Sarah, their story became the cautionary tale whispered around town. Sarah's rage had destroyed her reputation. Michael's weakness had destroyed his future. They had reached for greed with both hands and ended up empty. And me? I stood taller than I ever had. Not because I beat cancer, though I did. Not because I held on to a house. But because I discovered that even when blood betrays you, resilience can birth a new family. A chosen family. a better one. So when I tell you my story, I don't tell it with bitterness anymore. I tell it as proof. Proof that betrayal doesn't have to break you. That sometimes the people who hurt you the most give you the strength you never knew you had. And every night, when I close my eyes in the house Robert left me, listening to the steady rhythm of the ocean, I whisper, "Thank you." Because this isn't just my survival, it's my rebirth. And to anyone out there listening who feels abandoned, betrayed, left behind, let me be the one to tell you, you are stronger than they think, stronger than you know. That's my story, and this is my new dawn. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story. And please, tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? I'd love to hear your thoughts.